Good morning, everybody. We are back with Middleton Place Foundations, plugged into history, and today we are back with our blacksmith, Jamal Hall, and he's starting the fire right there. So this is On the Farm Wednesday, and today Jamal is going to teach us about the interpretation that he does here at Middleton Place. If you were able to tune in yesterday, hopefully you learned a little bit about Jamal personally, and if you have further questions for him about how he became an interpreter or previous experience that he has, or really anything that you want to know, do feel free to ask in the questions. But otherwise, today we're going to concentrate on the interpretation that Jamal offers here in the shop when people come to visit. So, if you are interested, oh, I'm getting static again, huh? I think that we are having some issues with Tropical Storm Bertha here. Let me know if that sounds any better. Otherwise, I'll unplug the mic and we will go ahead and just use the microphone in the camera. So we're here with Jamal. He is firing up his... Yay, thank you, I'm glad. He's firing up his forge today, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about blacksmithing on a plantation. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. And he's going to talk a little bit about Middleton Place's blacksmiths throughout history. Good morning. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm so glad that it's better. On any given day, Sunday through Thursday. This is probably what you would see in the morning here in the Blacksmith Shop. So there you go. Good morning, good morning, Joe. Good morning, Pat. Good morning, Mom. Hi, Cindy. Good morning. Thanks everybody for being here. Trade. The chain that Jamal is pulling on pumps the bellows. And that's the bellows up there, that accordion structure. That feeds air down a pipe and into the forge. And of course, every fire needs three things to function. It needs a spark, it needs fuel, and it needs heat. Air, fuel, and heat. So it starts from the spark. The bellows are giving air. The fuel is the coal, which I'm sure Jamal will talk about. You can see the heat that's being created by the fire there. So it gets a little smoky here in the shop. We are open to the public now, so you can certainly come and visit Jamal. We have barriers up so that you can stay safe 6 feet distance. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Good morning.
How you doing? All right. So I guess I'll do it like I normally do it for anybody who comes in here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Welcome to the Blacksmith Shop. My name is Jamal. I'm the blacksmith here at Middleton Place. I've been doing this for about 8 years now, and I do metalwork for around the plantation and for sale over in the garden market also. Shameless plug. Yeah.
I may or may not have bought some of your work this morning.
There you go. I get 70% of the profit, so please.
That's right. That's right. Make sure you buy Jamal's art.
Oh my goodness, yeah, the online store's coming up, but yeah.
It is, it is.
Yeah. Again, shameless plug, but yeah. So, this is the Blacksmith Shop. This is not the original Blacksmith Shop. This actually used to be a tool shed. This was constructed in about the 1930s, so this wasn't originally here. The original shop was actually about 4 or 5 miles in that direction there. That was still on the property back then. The plantation in 1860 was about 6,500 acres, so about 2 miles wide, about 5 miles long in its entirety. Today what you're seeing is about roughly, if you ever come out here, roughly about 110 of those acres. So you're seeing a very small portion of the original plantation today.
And you said that original plantation, it jumps the road, right? It's across
Yeah,
Ashley River.
if you know where Highway 61 is, or Ashley River Road, miles beyond that is still Middleton Place. So yes, it is. Yeah, the original shop was out there on a part of the property known as Horse Savannah, where a majority of the animals, the crops, and the enslaved were kept. In 1860, for example, Middleton Place had roughly 100 to 150 enslaved Africans on this plantation. The blacksmiths, of course, were slaves themselves and responsible mainly for the tools on the plantation. So you're thinking of things like hammers, nails, shovels, hoes, pitchforks, horseshoes, things used in the crops, the gardens, tending to the animals, or even in various construction projects on the plantation. And not just making these tools, but also maintaining them as well, so if anything would break, they'd be the ones to fix it, replace it, sharpen it, whatever was needed. In terms of blacksmiths we know of, specifically at Middleton Place, we know of one. There's one off of the 1793 inventory from Middleton Place, which, before I mentioned there were 150 slaves in 1860. On the 1793 inventory, they list 93 slaves here, so you can see that number kind of jumps through the years. Right, so yeah, 1793 inventory, 93 slaves. Among them, there was a man named Quaco listed as the blacksmith. Quaco, we don't know a terrible amount about, like where exactly in Africa he may have been brought from or how he learned blacksmithing specifically. What we do know about him is that he was enslaved here, he was the blacksmith here, the only blacksmith here at the time. He was valued at 80 South Carolina pounds, which in today's money roughly translates to about $3,000. I looked it up.
That's a lot of money.
Inflation, right? Yeah, at that price, he's one of the most valuable people on the plantation, most likely because he was the blacksmith and the only blacksmith here. Now, to kind of show you how this works over here.
Make sure, folks, that you drop your questions in the comments. As always, we will be happy to answer them for you. Right. And by we, I mean Jamal.
So yeah, this right here, get it fired up. This right here is the forge. Up above my head is the bellows. You may have seen a smaller version of these in your fireplaces. Same thing, just much, much bigger. The way it works is when I pull this handle, as you see there, it's kind of smoking up. I gotta give it more air. But air is being forced up out of the bellows through this pipe over here. The pipe comes down, it wraps around underneath the forge, and air is being forced up through that vent underneath the hot coals there. So the more air adds to the fire, the hotter it gets. To give you an idea of temperatures, the forge can reach up to about 2,400 degrees Fahrenheit, which feels great in the middle of August, let me tell you. In terms of what I'm burning in the fire for fuel, see, we're not burning wood, we're actually burning coal. We get this from the mines out in Pennsylvania today. This is bituminous coal. It burns hot, it burns pretty long, so it's a great piece of fuel there. Historically, they wouldn't really be using coal. They'd be more likely to use wood or charcoal. South Carolina, we don't have much coal here in the state, or than the colony. So yeah, they'd be burning a lot more wood because we have plenty of trees out there. In terms of metal, today I work with steel. I get the steel in all different shapes and sizes. That's a little bit right there. This is a 1080 mild steel, a low carbon steel if you're familiar. There are about 200 different grades of steel. I could name them all for you, but we don't think we have that kind of time.
We do not have that kind of time.
Right. Great party trick, though. But, yeah, no, we work with, historically, they'd be working with wrought iron. Wrought iron, once again, South Carolina, we don't have much wrought iron in the state. So, historically, they'd be bringing it from one of the other colonies. In terms of the 1700s, they'd be bringing it from Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, I think Pennsylvania. Also, Sweden was mentioned as a big producer of iron at the time. So they're either shipping it from down the coast or across the ocean to Charleston in the form of bars, which made it all the more expensive.
Can you hold that steel up for me one more time? Y'all, I'm taking screenshots.
Oh, awesome.
We need to document
Awesome.
We did have a question, Jamal. And by the way, guys, when we're back here behind the ropes, this is even more access than you get when you come to Middleton Place. So cheerio for that.
Access for you.
That's right. Someone asked if blacksmiths were hired out to other plantations.
Yep. Yes, they were. That was not uncommon here in this area. You know, in terms of the Middletons themselves, I don't know specifically, but I have read of accounts of slave owners actually renting out their slaves to other plantations and other places in the area to do the work. And in some cases, masters would then make that money. They would sometimes give a cut to their slave, or not at all. You know, it was really dependent on the owner. And there's actually a story of, there's a blacksmith, I think in like Flat Rock, North Carolina. A guy was, he was a blacksmith for this guy. And the master had made a deal with him to keep giving him his cut. And eventually he made enough money to buy his own freedom and actually start his own business. You know, that wasn't something that was common, don't misconstrue, but you know, it was something that did happen, you know. So,
do we know what happened to Quaco?
Quaco?
This plantation?
We don't really know what happened. You know, I can't really tell you what happened, I can't tell you his story before 1793 or his story after 1793. All we have is that little picture of his life, that he was there in 1793 as a blacksmith. So I wish I could tell you more, but I don't really have much.
It's okay.
Oh boy.
I have one more question, and I'm not sure, well, I'll just ask. It says, would enslaved blacksmiths be treated differently?
Ooh.
So, I don't know what we mean differently from what? From other enslaved people? From free blacksmiths? I'm not sure, but so how would you answer that?
I think I know what you mean. Okay, I've gotten this question before. Okay, so I think, here's what I think. We look at the plantations, we look at the roles that the enslaved were holding. And typically blacksmiths, carpenters, coopers, these people that held skilled trades were not in great numbers on these plantations. So there's a chance that, yeah, they may have been treated differently just out of that case, because if something were to happen to your blacksmith, then you're now out of a blacksmith. So, you know, maybe putting them out in the rice fields in the middle of summer, you know, where they can catch some sort of disease or be bitten by an alligator, some sort of random thing would happen, isn't such a good idea. But at the same time, these blacksmiths, these carpenters, these coopers, all these skilled slaves, they're still slaves. They're at the whims of their owners, of the overseers. So if they needed them to work in these dangerous conditions, they would put them out there. But I would think that it would be more of like a last resort sort of situation, if that makes sense.
Thank you. It does. All right, great questions so far, folks, and we've only just begun. Thank you for your great questions. Keep them coming.
All right, real quick, I'm going to show you how I make a chain. Yeah, so if you remember from yesterday.
Or if you weren't here yesterday. Here's,
I'll catch you up. So right now I'm working on this chain here, and I'm not really doing anything special with it. I'm just going to put it up in the doorway to replace this rope over here, just to maintain social distancing. So this is my official social distancing chain.
Yeah, seems inappropriate for a blacksmith shop to have a rope.
Yeah, right?
A metal barrier seems better for a blacksmith
shop. You can make a chain, right? You know, it makes more sense. So what I'm going to do right now is first of all, to make a chain, you got to make each individual link. You know, you can't go to Lowe's and just buy it, right? So yeah, you make each individual link. I try to make them about the same size. Each link is roughly about 1 inch long. You know, of course they're kind of different shapes because it's not a machine made. But what I'm going to do is I have 2 links. I like to make these in 3s. So I'll make one, I'll make the other one, and then I'll link them both together by basically curling that around, welding it at the end, and then we have the beginnings of a chain. So we're going to heat this thing up.
Folks, I see your questions. I'm going to let Jamal work a little bit, and then I will ask him, because if I keep asking him, he'll never get to hammer some iron.
Yeah,
or some steel.
This is what you came to see.
Right. Well, no, that's not true. They came to hear you speak, but
that too.
That too. Well, while you do that, I have some questions for you.
Yeah.
Were there white tradespeople competing for business at this early date in history?
Typically, yeah. You know, there are stories. Not, I don't know specifically on the plantations, but within Charleston, yeah, there's competition between, oh boy, enslaved blacksmiths and carpenters, and you know the poorer white tradesmen as well. And it became a thing of ire from the poor white tradesmen because, well, why would you hire them and pay them a somewhat decent wage when you could just hire, well, not hire, but you know, have an enslaved person do the same job for free.
Right.
You know, so yeah, it would become a source of racial tension within Charleston. So yeah.
Leads to the on plantations common.
It was yeah, typically if you're...
That's how this trade is learned, right?
Yeah, it's learned from person to person. You know, if your parent was a blacksmith, chances are you're probably going to be a blacksmith. Or, you know, if you don't have any children, if your children were sold off, typically they might have you teach somebody else how to do it. So yeah, that wasn't uncommon.
And then, do you make swords?
It'll cost you. Say that, you know. I don't really make swords that often, no.
Most blacksmiths were not armorers.
You know,
right?
like, here on the plantation, they're not necessarily making weapons for battle or anything. You know, it's all about the farming. It's all about the agriculture. So you know, they need tools to work. Mainly, this is a rice plantation, so they need tools to work the rice. You know.
So we have a question about your clothing.
Yes.
Our question about your pants. Are they too large and just pulled tight at the waist? And so I think that this is a question about 18th century garments. So y'all, the style of an 18th century garment is to have gathers in the back and to have it really rather bulbous, so that when the gentleman bends his legs or sits down, that yes, he can do that comfortably without splitting his pants. So no, it's not that they're too big. They fit just fine, I should think. I mean, he's the one wearing them.
Yeah.
But the waistbands are meant to be close fitting, and then the extra fabric there in the back is exactly what it's supposed to be. So yeah, it's a great question about 18th century clothes. If you want to know a little bit more about that, you can go back in our playlists a couple of weeks. We did do an entire fashion week on clothing of the 18th century, so you can get a look at some extant 18th century breeches that the plantation has. And Renee would like to know, Jamal, if you learned blacksmithing here at Middleton Place or if you've studied elsewhere. So I know you spoke about that a little bit yesterday.
So yeah, I'm originally from Delaware. When I first started out at Fort Delaware, where my first historic site that I worked at, and my friend was the blacksmith there. And I just walked into the shop one day. The guy came in. I came in. And he said, "Hey, you want to try it?" I said, "Sure." And from there, he started teaching me how to do it, and that's where I started. And then when I got here to Middleton Place, they sent me off to the John C. Campbell Folk Art School in Brasstown, North Carolina. Shout outs to them. They're awesome people. I took a week-long course in blacksmithing. I learned so much in a short time. So, yeah.
Sure. Susan, pulling the chain as he's doing, works the bellows, which drives air down the pipe and into the fire. That's how the fire gets its air fed into it. And then he puts the coal on top of the fire there as fuel to make it hot. any metal yet, and this is an incredibly physically demanding job. He's pumping air through the bellows and into the fire to make it hot enough to change the chemical composition of the metal in order to make it soft and malleable to make it formable. So when metal is heated, it is not melted, not until a certain temperature, white hot temperature. First it's becoming malleable so that it can be bent. And really hot fire is required to make metal malleable, and then to make it white hot and meltable. So already Jamal is working really hard physically. Now, Jamal, we did have a question about whether you think that blacksmiths who were enslaved lived longer than enslaved field workers, which is an interesting question. As you can see, guys, that's a pretty big fire, so it's not that blacksmithing is without danger. There's plenty of danger in this shop.
It's not to say, it's not to say that every job had its own level of difficulty, and there was definitely, I wouldn't say that on a plantation there's any job better than another. You know, whether you're in the house, whether you're in the fields, whether you're in a blacksmith shop, each situation has its difficulty for some reason. And so you can kind of imagine what I'm doing from what I'm doing here, you know, coming in here day in, day out doing this, middle of the summer. So it's its own thing. I don't like to compare, situations, I guess you can say.
Sure.
But in terms of whether or not they live longer, I can't really answer that one. I don't know the answer to that one, I'm sorry.
Sure, we would have to find statistical analysis of, a bunch of records of enslaved field workers and enslaved blacksmiths and look at data about their lifespans.
Yeah, there's
a lot that would go into that kind of a study.
Maybe we'll get back into that,
Yeah.
We'll look into it.
Someone wants to know if your arms get tired.
Yeah! Yes, they do. They're tired right now, man. We gotta heat. We haven't even done anything yet. We gotta heat this thing up, and then I gotta hit it on the end. It's not done. Like I said, this is hard stuff.
Oops, sorry guys. Just checking out my time there.
What we're doing is making a chain link, so we're going to bend that into a circle.
Does coal last longer than wood or charcoal? Someone would like
It
to know.
sure does. It's great, If I were to just if I put enough coal here and just leave it like that, it'll keep burning for at least another 2 or 3 hours, without me doing anything, But wood will just burn up like that, So when you're I've actually worked with charcoal in this thing. I put charcoal in there and it just immediately it burns, it goes. So you have to keep adding it on, and it's annoying. So yeah, coal, I love coal.
And tell us about decorative ironwork for the house and such, like downtown. Is this something typical, or would that only have been for a special order, or what, is that something that plantation owners would have cared about, or are they worried about? I don't know.
I suppose it would vary from plantation to plantation what the owner is asking of his blacksmith. But specifically, what I think the blacksmiths were here for were the work on the tools for the plantation. And it's not to say that they couldn't ask for those things, like decorative gates or things like that, but I think it was, that's their purpose. That's why they're there, to make these tools. Because it's a long way to Charleston from here. You know, you can go to Charleston, you could buy from a blacksmith down there and then come all the way back, or you could have somebody right here ready to work for you at any given time. So it just made things a little bit easier in that regard. But in terms of decorative ironwork, which of course Charleston is littered with it, alright, let me tell you my hypothesis on that, which I still have to do a little more research on. Okay, so I look at the prices of iron. Wrought iron has always been expensive. It's always been this very valuable commodity. So Charleston, South Carolina, we don't have iron here readily available. It's not something that's naturally occurring in the state, so you have to ship it from somewhere, which adds to the cost of producing it and also mining it from somewhere else. So you're paying all this money for these bars of iron, and then you notice Charleston, because of its role in the slave trade, because of its role in
the entire institution.
Rice, you know, all this money is concentrated here in Charleston. It's one of the richest cities in the colonies by the 1770s. So there's a lot of wealth concentrated in Charleston. So it's interesting to see that, you know, a trend in Charleston is people, you know, buying these large quantities of iron, not necessarily for tools or labor or anything, but they're having blacksmiths shape these very intricate gates and patterns, and having them posted outside their very large houses downtown. So it's a symbol of status, basically. How much iron can you afford? What can you do with that iron, and that you can just have it just sitting outside of your house like that? It's very much a symbol of status. So yeah, it just speaks to the wealth of this city. And it speaks even today. You know, Charlestonians still love the iron gates and still love the look of them. So it's something that hasn't gone away, and it's something that's become very much a tradition here.
Thank you.
I hope I answered your question.
Certainly. Open because I'm going to put the links on this one. So this is how you connect them. Spicy. A little bit warm. So Jamal, I know you spoke about it a little bit yesterday, but tell us about making a chain on a former rice plantation.
Right, yeah, the dimensions of what I'm doing right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you. When you get right into that aspect of it, to think what chains could be used for on a plantation and who they could be for. You know, I don't know specifically in Middleton places, specific situation if the blacksmith was making like chains or shackles for other slaves, but you know, that's something that did go on somewhere. Because if you look at shackles, you look at chains, you know, these things were made by blacksmiths, there's no denying it. But as to who or what or where, I don't know. But there had to be situations where an enslaved person would have to make shackles or would have to make chains for somebody. And it could be one of their very own, you know, because they maybe decided to revolt or maybe decided to try to run away, some sort of punishment. And to think of it in that regard, And to be here in the 21st century, wearing the clothing, doing the act, and making this specific, very symbolic object of the institution, it's, yeah, there's a lot of depth to it, I guess you could say. You know, I don't know if I'm explaining that very well, but there's a lot to think about with it. I don't know. I try not to think too deeply of it, or else I go in a very dark path.
Sure. I think you're explaining it beautifully because you're explaining it the way that you experience it, and that's what we're interested in.
Someone asked me a question, I think yesterday, talking about, you know, as an African American, what's it like to work here? And, you know, that kind of leads into the same question. You know, there are mentally, it can be taxing. You know, because this is a very special place within our history. You know, there are many, like, I was at the family reunion the other year. You know, there are many people, many African Americans that can trace their lineage back to one of the Middletons owning their ancestors, or, you know, back to this plantation, to somebody who worked here. And so this place is the site of, you know, countless people who were forced into this labor, forced into this lifestyle. And to think of that, and to think of, you know, just, I don't know, the ramifications of that lifestyle, and the way it, I don't know, there's a lot that I feel that generally people don't consider.
Sure.
And there's a lot that, I don't know, we still need to talk about. We haven't reached that point in the discussion yet.
Sure.
But there's so much to it.
Well, and we talk about, you know, the way that enslaved people are treated, and there's discussions of punishment and how that happens, and people tend to think about this sort of physical, the physical consequences of any particular action, but folks, asking somebody to forge a chain for himself or for his family or for his friends is just one example of psychological warfare that comes along with the institution of enslavement. And there was plenty of that, from threatening to sell people to, I mean, just all sorts of, there's definitely a big mental, psychological warfare piece to this game that we don't really think about, and we should. And so thank you for doing this and for bringing that kind of thing to our attention. When you forge a chain here, even though this one is for a door frame, that requires us to consider the psychological aspects of the institution as well as the physical and present in our face aspects.
Absolutely. This part right here, this little white powder here is what we call borax. You may be familiar with it. It's a detergent. And all I'm doing is using this as a flux. So what that's going to do is, that is going to cause a reaction in the steel and allow it to be joined just a little easier. Which I don't need to do this necessarily, but it does make it easier to weld. So what I'm about to do is, now that I've added this on there, I'm going to heat this up to a white hot temperature, and, you know, we're going to get it melted, we're going to hit it together, it's going to join and become one piece, and we'll have the chain one.
And y'all, borax today is a detergent, but this substance has been known since the Middle Ages, so this is actually a historical way of doing forge welding.
So you see it's starting to join together there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're gonna do it again.
Did blacksmiths also make slave tags, Jamal? Do we know? I think those are made out of brass. Would that be a brass?
Slave tags, those are made, I've seen them made out of either tin or copper.
Okay.
So that would be the job of either a coppersmith or a tinsmith. Which not to say that blacksmiths didn't dabble in those things. Interesting about the word blacksmith. If you look at the word blacksmith, you'll see two words there. You'll see the word black and the word smith. Black refers to the type of metals that we work with. We work with iron and we work with steel. You notice the coloring on the steel, or iron looks just the same way as this. It has a dark coloring or a black look to it. This is why in ancient times, thousands and thousands of years ago, they would come to refer to these metals as the dark metals or the black metals. And smith comes from an Old English word, smite, or some have said smite, which means to strike or to hit. So when you put these two words together, it means that we strike at the dark metals. And of course, there are smiths for all different kinds of metal: goldsmiths, silversmiths, coppersmiths, tinsmiths. Blacksmiths, we work specifically with the iron and the steel. So when you're engaging in the action of working with copper, you're technically coppersmithing. You're not blacksmithing anymore. But when you work with the iron and the steel, you are blacksmithing. So a blacksmith can't be a coppersmith because he is still a black. Does that make? I'm not, okay.
When one works with, it's the metal that one works with that determines the name.
Yes. So yeah, that would be my answer.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good.
But in terms of whether the slaves themselves were making slave tags for other slaves, that I don't know. I have to do more research on that. So I'll try and get back to you.
And so how many times with the borax and the welding? Is there a set number or just till it's done?
For just until it's done, by a general rule, I try to do it until there's no seams in there, because I want to see that the metal is now all just one sort of cohesive piece and not still two pieces. Because if you look at it very closely, you can still sometimes see lines where one part ends and one part begins. You shouldn't. If you did it right, you shouldn't really see that, So the goal is to make it seamless, like it's always been like this.
Fair enough.
But for the sake of time, I'll get as close as I can.
You're good. What's one thing that you personally, as a historical interpreter, would like for visitors to take away from their trip to Middleton Place?
Let me see. As a historical interpreter, given all the research and resources that we have available that Middleton Place Foundation has uncovered over several decades of work and research, and it's not just me out here, it's everybody in the house and everyone on the tours and everyone, it's a group effort, and not just me. I think, well, I can't speak for everyone, but for me, I would like people to know I would like people to gain some sort of empathy. I would like people to be able to step onto this plantation and just, if not just for a second or a minute, just imagine what it must have been like to come here. Yes, this is a place of beauty, the trees, the gardens, everything. But imagine, someone had to put these gardens together. Someone had to work in these fields in order to generate the wealth, in order to build this house, in order to have these animals, in order to have this iron to work, all of that came from someone else's labor. And so when they come to Middleton Place, I want them, not just to enjoy the place, yes, enjoy it, have fun, but also think for a second what it took to make this place what it is. Just try and put yourself in that person's shoes for a minute, if you can. That's all I want.
Thank you.
Right, are you getting this?
Yeah, pretty work to avoid the other links. When the other links are hot, folks, they are also malleable, so he has to be careful.
That is just about seamless. You can't tell it's even like 2 feet. Look at that, look at that.
Yeah.
So that's the goal.
Love it.
And then I try to get it to where I don't have like a lump of material on top of it, but sometimes I can't. But that's what makes the chain interesting.
That's right.
That's how it would have looked. That's how they would have made it. There are errors. There are pieces that aren't perfect, and that's
the difference between handmade and machine made, right?
Exactly.
These links are not made by a machine. They're made by a person's hands.
That's some good chain, man. That'll hold some stuff.
I know it.
For the sake of uniformity. When you're working with the other links and they like to get in there. That works.
And so then what?
And then
Here we are. So y'all can see that the color of this is fading. It's going to a dark cherry red, and then it's gonna turn even more dark and look like cool black steel. But
yeah, it's still there. So this right here.
still hot.
What I like to do with it, this is beeswax. So I take it, I leave it in the beeswax. The wax melts onto it, forms a seal over it. It gets into the pores of the metal, and it seals it off, prevents it from rusting, and it also gives it that nice dark patina. And I just kind of let it cool. If I put it in the water, that's going to take the beeswax right back off of it, and then it'll be susceptible to rust. So I just let it cool.
Really quick question about quenching.
Yeah.
What he's talking about is putting it in water. That's called quenching.
Mhm.
So why would we not necessarily do that to a metal object? I think people sort of watch movies and they see the blacksmiths take things right out of the fire and put them into the water, and there's this big
Yeah, people love that. But
Yeah.
the point of it, quenching is either to cool something off, or you're in the process of tempering something, so it can be part of strengthening it. So there's a couple different applications of quenching, and then there's other things besides water that you quench it in, like oil, or wax, for example. Everything has its own purpose, but for the sake of this, you don't necessarily need to quench the chain. The chain is fine on its own. It's pretty darn strong as it is,
Wouldn't it make it brittle?
It would, unless you would heat it up again a second time, and then you would put it in oil, and that would make it like super strong then.
That's what he was talking about with tempering.
But for the purpose of what I'm making it for, just to hang in the doorway, I don't necessarily need this to pull like a cart or
Right.
like a whatever. I just need it to hang in the doorway.
Right.
So-
and avoid rusting.
And
which is what wax is
avoid
for.
rusting. So it's strong enough for that purpose.
Oh, for sure. So it's still steaming, so if y'all ever come to the blacksmith shop, don't touch anything until he tells you can touch it, because it may be warm.
Oh no, I'll let you touch it.
Oh, no, don't say that.
That'll teach you not to go into other people's places and touching their things. Like, I wouldn't come to your house and just pick stuff up. So
That's right. Consent is cool. You gotta ask. You can see, though, honestly, y'all, it's still steaming. That is a very hot piece of metal.
Yeah.
These ones are cool.
So yeah, do you guys have any other questions about anything? Would you like to see me finish the chain? I don't know how much time we have.
Man, I don't have that kind of time, but we'll come back when it's finished and hanging in the door. How long does it take to make, Sarah would like to know.
Let me see. I've been working on and off on this for the past couple weeks. I could have done it a lot faster. I think I could have done this in like a few days. Honestly, if I was working at it just straight up, but we have visitors that come through. I get questions, so I take time from this to answer those questions.
Sure. Crazy girls come and put cameras in your face and make you talk about it.
Yeah.
So if y'all want a bonus chicken, because I have a penchant for bonus chickens, Kylo is making some noise. So there you go. There's noisy Kylo. You're so handsome. All right. I almost always give them a bonus chicken, so
Yes.
that was well timed. All right, folks, if anybody has any further questions, please put them in the comments section here. We'll be happy to ask Jamal for answers and then type them out for you. So we hope that you've enjoyed this. Jamal, is there any last nuggets of wisdom that you'd like to leave with our visitors for today?
Nothing in particular. Stay in school, kids. Don't do drugs.
Right? Stay safe, stay 6 feet away from everyone.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
That's right. All right, well, thank you so much, everybody. This has been On the Farm Wednesday, and we are doing interpreter spotlights this week. This has been our second day with Jamal Hall, blacksmith interpreter at Middleton Place Foundation. So when you all come and visit us safely and with good social distancing and mask-wearing practices, we will be excited to welcome you to the doorway of the shop where you can meet Jamal in person. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thanks for participating in Plugged Into History. Every time you join us, you help Middleton Place Foundation forward its mission of connecting people with the past through American history and allowing us through American history to better understand ourselves and each other. So thank you so much, Jamal. Everybody remember, empathy. It's kind of in short supply these days.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going for here. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow for Hands-On History Thursday. We will be highlighting another interpreter, Doug Nesbitt, the Cooper, at Middleton Place. So thank you very much, Jamal. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.